Hello and welcome back to America's Forum here on Newsmax TV. With negotiations aimed at reaching a final deal with Iran set to resume next week at the White House, the White House has come under fire from Congress and others. At issue, the refusal by the White House to publicly release text of the recently signed interim agreement to roll back portions of that country's contested nuclear program in exchange for billions of dollars in economic sanctions relief. Members of Congress, Ileana Ros-Lehtinen, who you'll hear from in just a second, and staffers with high-level security clearances are being forced by the White House to consent to top-secret security measures just to read the text. This has many wondering, including Representative Ileana Ros-Lehtinen, what's next from the administration. She calls this, quote, a super-secret location that is being shrouded in a cone of silence. We'll have an interview with Congresswoman Ileana Ros-Lehtinen coming up in the program. Also today, on the first day of her new role as a Fed chair, Janet Yellen's message was business as usual as she looked to ease fears over the January jobs report in foreign markets. And judging from the 200-point jump in the Dow Jones Industrial Average that followed, her decision to remain on course was welcomed by investors. Yellen chose to continue down the path of her predecessor, Ben Bernanke, who stepped down last month. She embraced Bernanke's dual outlook on the economy. It's improving enough to withstand a slight pullback of the Fed's stimulus, yet still needs the help of low interest rates. She dropped no hints of how her leadership might depart from Bernanke's, though, stressing that the Fed would decide whether to continue paring its bond purchases and eventually force short-term interest rates based on how the economy improves. She repeated the Fed's assurances that it expects to keep its key short-term rate near zero well past the time the unemployment rate drops below 6.5%, as long as inflation remains low. Yellen offered unsolicited to stay all day, noted the committee chairman, Jeb Hensarling, a break from recent practice which Bernanke and his predecessor, Alan Greenspan, tended to only sit around for 2 or 3 hours to answer all the questions from Congress. In total, Yellen testified for nearly 5 hours. Also, big news, consumer advocates and industry experts and cable subscribers have voiced their concerns about the blockbuster deal to combine Comcast and Time Warner Cable, the nation's two largest cable companies. The $45 billion deal, if approved by federal regulators, would result in a total customer base of 30 million subscribers. It could bring technological advances to the world of cable TV and high-speed internet. But the proposed merger comes at a time when customer satisfaction with the cable TV industry, and the two companies in particular, is at an all-time low. Last year, Comcast and Time Warner Cable came in dead last in an industry consumer satisfaction survey performed by the American Consumer Satisfaction Index. Well, coming up later on our personal interest story, we'll also talk about a kind-hearted recluse who, in one final act of kindness, gave a gift worth millions of dollars to churches in his community. Good to have you back here with us on the second hour of America's Forum. Taking a closer look now at the Federal Reserve, we have Jeff Yasteen with us. Jeff, it's good to have you with us.
Thank you, John.
All right, so as Yellen takes over the helm of the Reserve, she made it clear that she was going to stay the course and not make any abrupt changes. Here's Yellen.
My colleagues on the FOMC and I anticipate that economic activity and employment will expand at a moderate pace this year and next. The unemployment rate will continue to decline toward its longer-run sustainable level, and inflation will move back toward 2% over coming years.
Okay, so what does it all mean? Yellen said the Fed was on track to continue reducing its stimulus despite the labor market recovery being far from complete. Investors liked what Yellen had to say about the Fed's policies and the economy. The Dow jumped nearly 193 points following her first public comments. All right, we have Jeff Yasteen with us. Also, we're going to be talking to William Isaac, who is a senior managing director of FTI Consultant and serves as global head of FTI's financial institutions practice. Mr. Isaac was appointed to the board of the FDIC at the age of 34, making him the youngest FDIC board member in history. Good to have you with us, sir.
Good to be with you.
All right, so we're taking a look at Yellen here, echoing her predecessor, Ben Bernanke, as she pledged to continue on the path here. What do you make of her remarks on the Hill?
Well, it's more of the same, and it's very disappointing to me. I think that QE has not been helpful to the economy. In fact, is impeding growth, and it's a terrible tax on senior citizens who are trying to have income for their retirement. They just can't find a way to earn money unless they want to jump into the stock market, and a lot of people are afraid to do that.
Now, she did kind of hint a little bit that she was going to divert from Bernanke's policy, if ever so slightly. Was there anything in there, Bill, that you liked that Yellen said?
Not much. I don't like the fact that she's pledging to keep interest rates low for the foreseeable future. I believe the markets ought to have to guess a little bit what Fed policy is. Right now, the Fed is so dominant in the markets with all of its QE purchases, with its pledge to keep interest rates low for the foreseeable future, that the market really isn't having an opportunity to clear, to reach bottoms and go to new heights and so forth. The Fed is in charge of the markets, and that's just not healthy. The markets need to allocate resources, not the Federal Reserve.
All right. Now, Yellen also talked about this issue of bubbles, which, if you kind of really read into the past Fed chairs, this was a word that was kind of a dirty word from the Fed chairman. She doesn't seem to be too scared to mention bubbles in these types of public forums.
Well, I think that the Fed is running a big risk of creating bubbles. For example, farmland prices have been going up at an unsustainable rate for a number of years now. And if you look around, you'll see evidence of bubbles in different markets for different goods and services. So I think that's the risk of the Fed being so dominant in these markets that you create misallocation of resources.
Yeah, one last question before we bring in Jeff Yasteen to join us as well in this discussion, Bill. Do you think that her statements on the Hill would have been any different had the January jobs report maybe been a little bit more robust?
Hard to say. My guess is not, because I don't think that she's thinking short term. I don't think they're going to react to a given report and have that change their behavior. But I wish the Fed would just begin to unwind QE. I mean, I know they've already are beginning to unwind QE2, but QE3. But I wish they would just continue to unwind, not announce their goals, and just let the market start to operate. And as they always have for years, make them guess about what Fed policy is, rather than feeding the markets whatever they want to hear.
Jeff, is that your take here? Do you think that it needs to be less information, I guess?
In many ways, yes. Bill, my question to you was that my impression is that in many ways Janet Yellen and the Fed is sort of boxed in here in terms of how the message she can give. Obviously, the stock market and the economy is addicted to this zero interest rate policy and the quantitative easing that's we've undergone for the last 2-3 years here. So she has to continue to support that, yet also sort of make the noises, to say we're going to be continue withdraw stimulus as we see fit. It's like they want the best of both worlds, even though they're not going to get it.
No, I would agree. They have created a very difficult situation for themselves, and it's going to be very delicate. I think that the way to go about it would be to withdraw continue the taper, but not make any announcements about it. Just if it's $10 billion a month they're going to reduce, or $20 billion in a given month, just do it.
Well, what about the people, Bill, in that case, who say there's already a lack of transparency coming from the Fed?
Well, I would disagree with that. I think there's a lack of transparency at the Fed in a lot of ways, but in terms of their monetary policy, I think they've been way too transparent, and that markets operate best when different people make different bets based upon different judgments about what's going to happen, and right now we don't have a free market because the Fed is spoon-feeding the market, saying, here's what we're going to do, here's how long we're going to be doing it. And so nobody has to guess about when are rates going to go up. If I had to guess about when rates are going to go up, I might make a different borrowing decision today than I would if I knew precisely when rates were going to go up. Right now the Fed is telling us the market is so bad, the economy is so bad, and it's going to be so bad for so long, that we're going to keep rates low for the next, let's say, 2 or 3 years. Now what incentive do I have to go out and borrow today versus a year from now or 2 years from now? I have none. what incentive do I have to invest in an economy when the Fed tells me it's going to be lousy for the next 2 or 3 years? So I really think that it's distorting the markets, and we really need to get back to believing that the markets really do operate properly.
Yeah, and Jeff, that speaks to your whole boxed-in idea here.
It is, and one thing I was watching with fascination yesterday is that as Yellen was speaking, not only was the stock market going up, but I was watching gold. Gold has had a terrific 2 months here, a month and a half since the beginning of the year. It's up, it looked like 9–10% as of yesterday. I don't know what it is today so far. Bill, what do you think gold is saying here as all the gold traders and those who buy, or as the case has been the last couple of years, selling gold equities? What do you think gold's doing here? What is it signaling?
I don't really know. I must tell you that I've been around for a fair length of time, and I've watched a lot of markets, and I don't know how to read this one in almost any way, because it is not a free market right now. It is a Fed-dominated market, and it's responding to the Fed's words and actions instead of to economic activity, purely economic activity. And so that's why the stock market scares me. I don't know if it's properly valued or not, and I don't know if gold is properly valued or not, because the Fed is so dominating these markets that it's hard to say you're getting a good read from very smart people making their individual decisions in the marketplace.
Yeah, and so Bill, as we see kind of this reoccurring knee-jerk reaction from Wall Street every time we hear from the Fed that they're going to keep up with business as usual, how long can that continue? Because there's different classes of investors, and I think a lot of retail investors, the average rank-and-file guy at home, is getting really fed up with the volatility in the market, it's particularly when it seems so to follow so naturally from these presentations from the Fed.
I really don't know how long they're going to keep it up. They've kept it up a lot longer than I would have. I wish they would begin to work their way out of the market as quickly as possible and let the market stand on its own legs. And I don't mean just the stock market. I mean all markets. Let them do what they need to do. To me, that's the only way we're going to have a sustainable economic recovery is for the government to get out of the way and let the private markets work.
All right, so let's go back to what you said about the Fed needing to kind of roll back this tapering without telling anybody about it. Eventually, folks, I guess, would find out. What do you think the reaction would be if they did something like that, and then later on that information eventually came out as you would suspect it would?
Well, it will come out, and I'm saying that I wouldn't make that a secret if I were the Fed. I'd say we're no longer going to announce that. We're not going to announce all this stuff anymore.
Okay, I see. So we're going to do it, but we are
going to wind down. We're going to taper at a pace we believe is appropriate. We're not going to give you advance notice.
Interesting. What do you think about that, Jeff?
I think it would be an amazing turn of events if it actually happened. I think it would be a good thing, because really what we're describing is going back to what the Fed used to do in the the Volcker era and before that, where they tried not to be too transparent, because in some ways, if you're too transparent, you lose your power. And that's what the Fed ultimately, it's now lost some of its power, and it's almost beholden in many ways, it could be argued, to the markets, because suddenly the markets are driving it instead of the Fed.
Yeah, in a lot of ways.
That is very well said. And I served as chairman of the FDIC when Paul Volcker was chairman of the Fed. I don't believe there's ever been a better chairman of the Fed in our history.
No.
And one thing that was distinctive about we laughed about it about Volcker when he testified was when he was done, you would say, "What did he say?"
That's interesting. Bill, Isaac, thanks for being with us. Jeff, great questions there as well. We want to hear from you guys. What do you think about all of this? You can reach us on Facebook, social media, all the regular platforms. You can find me directly at johnb_Newsmax and at Newsmax TV for all of us here. And email us, connect@newsmaxtv.com. And you can find us on Facebook as well, facebook.com/Newsmax. When we come right back, one of the largest providers of cable and internet coverage wants to get even bigger. We'll take a look at what it could all mean for the choices you have on your TV and on the internet. Don't go away.